Thank you very much, Randy. Good morning, everyone. Good morning. I hope you are in distance where you can see and hear. It's an honor to be with you this morning. The Atlanta Leadership Forum has had some very gifted leaders and speakers at these events, and so I feel honored to be invited to be part of it today. I love to talk about leadership, and I love to talk to leaders. And so I'd like to start out by congratulating each of you for being here this morning. If you can get up this early and arrive in relatively good shape and invest some time in becoming a better leader, which I'd like to do with you this morning, you're to be congratulated. So I'm kind of informal. I don't know if I can even stand behind a piece of wood like this. And so I want us just to relax a little bit. So the first thing you need to do is you need to give yourselves a hand for being here. Can you do that this morning? Just relax a little bit. And enjoy yourself. Now, leadership is an important topic. As I said, I love to talk about it, but I want you to know what I want to share with you this morning is my experience and my conclusions. One of the things I know about leadership is, there are a lot of opinions in leadership. There are a lot of people that see it from different perspectives, and so I'm going to give you my perspective. And I want you to know that I'm still very much a work in progress. I don't claim to have mastered any of the conclusions I've come to. So this morning, what I find myself doing when I have a chance to speak is to speak about the leadership issues that I'm grappling with personally. So I'm not going to tell you, anything I've arrived at. I'm going to share my struggles with you. I'm going to share the things I'm working on right now, and maybe in your position as a leader or your aspirations to become a leader, you can relate to some of those. And I do have a unique perspective. I mean, even the title of the presentation probably comes from a little bit different angle. I didn't attend business school, as you'll hear. And so I don't use a lot of business jargon, and you're not going to get any credit for this class, I can assure you. But I'm going to give it to you from the way I've experienced it. And you've probably used that expression. Anybody ever heard the expression, that's going to leave a mark? You were probably sitting on your couch watching funniest videos, and the clip that came up probably had a teenage boy in it with a skateboard. And as you saw the clip develop, you started to recognize that this isn't going to end well. And at the point of impact in that video, somebody said, that's going to leave a mark. And that might be an unusual way to approach leadership because it's a little bit negative when you think about it. That's not always a pleasant experience when that happens. But I think there's some similarities between those types of events in life. If you probably can't tell from where you're sitting, or at least hopefully you can't, but if you got up a little closer, you'd find out I got a number of those marks, a number of those scars from accidents, injuries, surgeries, those kinds of things. And if you got up close, you'd even notice my upper lip has a scar on it. When I was 7 years old, I was riding my bicycle on the gravel road out in the country where I grew up, and I turned to look over my shoulder because I thought I heard a car coming, which was a kind of an unusual circumstance out in that part of the country. And my front wheel of my bicycle hit a huge rock that was lying in the middle of the road. And my bicycle immediately stopped, and I went right over the handlebars. And when I landed, as my mom always said, I always landed on my head. But in this case, I happened to land on my mouth. And my two top front teeth went through my upper lip. And it has left a scar. Even now, 47 years later, the scar is still there. But it's more than just the physical appearance of the scar, because that event changed a lot of things about me. I remember that like it happened yesterday. See, that event left a mental image, a mental impression. It changed the way I think. It also changed the way I ride a bicycle. Okay, I don't ever look backwards on a bicycle anymore after that event, even after all these years. So it changed the way I think, and it changed my behavior. And I believe that's one of the key roles of a leader. That our job, and you'll hear leadership defined in so many ways, and I'll use some of those words today, is influence, impact, some of those things. But really, I think our job is to do what we can to influence thinking and behavior of those people around us. It might be helpful just to give you a little bit more background than Randy did. So let me tell you about my journey. As you can tell, it started in the sand of South Georgia on a very small tractor, a little John Deere. And since that time, I've covered a lot of territory. Actually, as you might know, was born as the youngest of 4 children. We moved from South Georgia up to the countryside outside of Atlanta when I was a child, and I grew up like most boys did in the 60s and 70s, just being all about sports, just loving sports. That's all I wanted to do. I wanted to play sports as long as I could, and then when I got too old to play or wasn't good enough to go to the next level, to coach. That was what I dreamed of. And so that was the course I was on. Through high school, went to college, was blessed to get a partial scholarship to play football in college. I met my lovely wife Karen in the summer between high school and college, and we married just before my senior year. And I went into that senior year in college on track to get out of school and teach and coach and be a leader in that area. But you know how it goes when you get down to decision time. Sometimes you start to have second thoughts. You start to wonder what else is out there. And so I was debating whether to continue school, go to graduate school. I'd done my student teaching and was interviewing for jobs. And at the same time, a very influential person in my life, my big brother, who was also coaching and teaching, ran across a company that at that time was called A.L. Williams. And he came and started talking to me about the opportunity to use the things that I had learned in sports and coaching. The motivation, the excitement, the competition, the camaraderie in a business environment where you could have all that fun, because fun's important to me, but at the same time you could have rewards of business. And so in 1981 I started as a salesperson for A.L. Williams, now Primerica. Spent a couple of years in the field, and then in 1983 came into the home office, as many of us did in the Atlanta area in that era when the company was growing so fast as a brand new company. In 1985 was asked to become part of a team to take a 2-year adventure and move to help the company start operations in Canada. And so Karen and I had been married about 5 years. We didn't have any kids, no deep roots, and that was the adventure, a 2-year adventure that turned into a 15-year career. And so we stayed up there for 15 years. We joke about, did they forget we were there, or were we just up there hiding from what was going on in Atlanta at the time? It could be either. And then in 2000, as Randy mentioned, when our current co-CEOs, Rick Williams and John Addison, took over, they called us back and said, we'd like for you to be part of the senior leadership team here in Atlanta. So we moved back to Atlanta in 2000, and then in 2005, we're blessed to be asked to serve as president of this company. So that's just a little bit about what happened between the tractor in the sand at Fitzgerald, Georgia, to today. I want to talk to you a little bit about our company just so that you have a little bit of context. And this is not a commercial for Primerica as much as it is to understand, as we think about the role of being a leader, a lot of that is driven by the environment that you're in and the job that you're asked to do. So it'd probably be helpful just to have a little bit of a background on the company. So our history as a company, we were founded in 1977 right here in Atlanta, Georgia, by our founder, Art Williams. Now, let's just pause for just a minute and address the most common question that I received. I've received it even here this morning, and I promised the person that asked me that I would address this. What could you imagine that is? Glenn, you've already mentioned a number of Williamses. You got a co-CEO named Williams. Your name is Williams. The founder is Art Williams. What is the deal? And of course, if you're familiar with our demographics as a country, you will know that Williams is the third most common last name in the United States after Smith and Johnson. Okay, Jones is actually fourth, so there's an answer to a trivia question. You can win a bet, split the money with me, because that's what everyone says. But I would like you to know that as far as I know, I'm not related to any of the important Williamses in the company, but I'm still checking. All right, I haven't given up yet, because if you know the story of the company, that might be something of value to our family. But not related to Art. Art ran the company and grew the company phenomenally until the early 90s, and at that point sold the company to a mega corporation of the time. It was American Can as the discussion started. It was named Primerica at the time that the transaction took place in 1990. It eventually became Travelers Group and then Citigroup. So coming out of the entrepreneurial era of the 70s and 80s, we became part of a giant corporation, at one time part of the largest financial services institution in the world, at Citigroup's heyday, for a period of 20 years. Now that was an interesting time from a leadership perspective, because we went from being owned by the founder, which is going to have a very definite personality of his personality, and his wife Angela, they put their stamp on the company, to being part of a major corporation. And of course, most of us learned at that time the golden rule of business, which I'm sure you've heard: the people that have the goal make the rules. And so everything changed during that 20 years. Ownership changed, leadership changed. We had so many people come down from New York to run our company. We actually had an era that we called the CEO of the month, because they would send somebody down and that person would say, don't really like it down here. These are odd people with funny accents, and they'd send somebody else down. And so it was a time where you really learn, okay, what kind of leader do you want to be? What kind of culture do you want to create? And it wasn't all bad, all right? It was important for us to be part of a major corporation going through some of the economic conditions of that 20 years. But then just a few years ago in 2010, after the economic crisis had proven that the model that Citigroup was using was not going to succeed long term, we were privileged enough to split from Citigroup and become our own independent public company in April of 2010. That year we were named one of the top IPOs of the year, and so that's when we kind of got our identity, our ownership, and our control back in our own hands. And so we have the privilege of being both 36 years old and having a track record that is held up under a lot of different conditions and circumstances, but at the same time being 3 years new, so that we have the opportunity to be innovative. We have the opportunity to be nimble. And so that has impacted the leadership roles of all of us in the company and has certainly given us a lot to choose from, both the good and the bad, over that 36-year history. Our mission is very simple. We help families earn more money and then protect that money with various types of insurance, become debt-free, and also become financially independent as their ultimate goal. I like our goal better than our mission because every day my job is to help our company create more financially independent families than any other company ever has. And so that's how we measure our success. And that's whether we're dealing with our teammates, our independent representatives who are building a Primerica business, or whether we're dealing with our clients. The objective is to help their family become financially independent. Just quickly, you heard about some of our numbers. We operate on a pretty large scale, a lot of people, 92,000 licensed representatives at the end of last year. We have about 6 million clients. You can see some of our financial numbers on the left side of this slide. $1.2 billion in revenue, $175 million in net income. Our return on equity last year was a little over 14%, and our total shareholder return last year was a little over 30%. So it was a pretty good year in 2012. Life insurance in force, well over $500 billion of life insurance, $500 billion of life insurance in force. We paid out death claims to our beneficiaries last year of over $1 billion. We have assets under management of our clients' money for their retirement of over $37 billion. And we pay our sales force, which is a very important number if you understand our business and how we operate, over $500 million in compensation. So we're operating and leading on a large scale. And I don't think that really makes a lot of difference in the type of leader you become, but it makes a difference in how you execute leadership and how you leverage leadership. And so scale is important. Our performance last year, as you can see from the blue line, our stock price outperformed the S&P 500 pretty significantly, so we're pretty proud of that performance. And we're good at a number of things, but one of the things we do best is celebrate. That's an aerial shot of our company convention that we do every other year in the Georgia Dome. That's about 50,000 people gathered in the Georgia Dome for 3 days of education, of motivation, of training, of recognition. It's a little bit of a combination of a normal company convention, a rock concert, and a big wrestling match. It's bigger than life. And sometimes when people introduce me, they say, well, Glenn has spoken to crowds as large as 50,000, and people go, how could you assemble a crowd of 50,000? Well, that's how. And people come from all over North America to that event, and so we have a lot of fun as well. Just so you understand the leadership part of my day-to-day role in business, I thought I'd share with you some of the behind-the-scenes concepts at Primerica, because it is a unique company that still bears the stamp of our founders, Art and Angela Williams. And so one thing about leadership is the type of leader that we become and how effective we are is going to be impacted by the culture that we're part of. And so if we can find ourselves part of a constructive culture, it makes it easier, it makes it more fun, it makes it more effective to be a leader. And so part of our culture as a company is very interesting, is that we put faith first, family second, and finances third as a company. Now, that's particularly important in our company. I think that would be important in anyone's life, because I said our goal was to create more financially independent families than any other company. If we focus on that every day and that's all we focus on, it's pretty easy to get out of balance. Randy mentioned balance during the introduction. And so if we aren't strong in promoting, not just permitting, but promoting priorities that say there are things more important in life than finances, it would be very easy to get too focused on the financial part of life and forget that family and faith were more important. Finances are designed to support family. Family and finances are designed to support faith. And one of the things that attracted me to this company is that was consistent and is consistent with my personal philosophy. And so again, the culture is something that I'm comfortable in. We have tremendous loyalty in our company. We have over 8,000 of our field leaders. Of that 92,000, and 60% of our VPs and above in the company have been with the company over 20 years. And in today's environment where the retention is lower than it's ever been of employees, where time in service is down around 4 years or less now on average, which is pretty amazing, we've got a lot of people that have been around a long time. You know, for me, it's 32 years. For many, it's over 20. That's a huge positive. That's a place that people like to be. But it's not all positive. You know, you can get very entrenched in your views of the world. You can shut out the outside. You can lose your ability to innovate. And so with every strength, there's a weakness. And I think as leaders, we need to be on guard for those things and recognize that strengths and weaknesses come in pairs. Another challenge that brings is bringing in new talent, sometimes tough. You get a bright new young person that comes on board at Primerica, the first question he or she may ask is, when are some of these old fossils going to retire or die? And just get out of the way. I mean, these guys have been around a long time. Do they never, ever leave and make room for young people? And so that's positive, but you have to be on guard for the negatives. And of course, we understand in an organization of that size that has a sales organization and a sales leadership organization of that size, that leadership is absolutely critical. We are working all the time. Our success is limited if leadership is limited. And so we're always in the process of developing leaders today, identifying and growing new leaders for tomorrow. We do feel like we're a unique business. If you understand our business model and where we operate, I don't have time to cover a lot of that today, but we're firmly entrenched in the middle market. Today we find that there are very few financial services companies still operating in the middle market, the $30,000 to $100,000 household income range. Most have moved upscale. And so we've said that's the territory we want to do business in. We want to be there in that market and do business in people's homes, as we say, at their kitchen tables. There's not very much competition there, but it's not an easy place to do business. The way we do that is by harnessing the entrepreneurial spirit. We invite people to come join us and be part of our distribution who are interested in building a business, and it just happens that that business is in the financial services arena. They recognize that there's a business opportunity in building financial services distribution, but I spend my day dealing with entrepreneurs, not financial professionals. And there's a different view of the world when you think of it that way. And we have a number of efficiencies because of the uniqueness of our model. We started out as an insurance agency. Art Williams started his company, it was an insurance agency. When we added investment products, we added some of the characteristics of a branch office system, of the investment business. Then we recognized we were bringing non-business people into business, and we said we need some of the characteristics of the franchise model to be added to what we do at Primerica. We adopted some of those. And then we have some of the explosive growth leverage of network marketing cooked in. So it's an interesting business model that's none of any of those four entirely, but it's some of each of those four, and it provides us a unique position in the marketplace. And then finally, I would share with you that one of the things that's important for our company, and I would propose that it's important to you as a leader, is that you do everything you can to keep things in alignment. Not just priorities balanced, but to keep business interests in alignment. I hear leaders speak once in a while and they proclaim, which by the way I agree with, this is wise, that you have to identify your customer. You have to know who the customer is. And that's important advice. But I can tell you as a leader, everyone's your customer. Anybody you come in contact with is your customer. In our business, our clients, the end consumer, has to be happy. They have to purchase the products. If they're not buying, we don't have a business. We've got a nonprofit educational institution. That's not what we're here for. You've got to keep the clients happy. At the same time, the field force, the people that are distributing our products, also have to feel like they're being treated fairly and have a huge opportunity. That's why the amount of compensation we pay them at Primerica is critical. That's why we offer them the opportunity to become owners of their business so they can build an asset for their family themselves. We offer them the opportunity as well to earn equity in the company, in the public company stock, so that their interests are the same as the company's interests and create that alignment. But they're my customers. But you know, so also the company is my customer, my client, our employees, our leadership of the company, our board of directors, if you're in a public company, they're a very important client of yours, our shareholders. And so one of the things I get asked often about our company logo when I wear it on my lapel, and people ask me, what is it? But they don't often ask what it means. And our company logo is the three rings of our clients, our constituency, both our clients, our sales force, and our company, and their success is intertwined. And that's part of the unique leadership culture that we're trying to create as a company. So Primerica is a unique place, but it's the place where I try to use my leadership skills and develop my leadership skills inside a culture that's fairly unique in the marketplace and unique in our industry, but it's certainly a place that's a lot of fun as well. So let's spend the rest of our time talking about how to transfer some of this, how to transfer some of this experience, some of this background, some of the uniquenesses of where I spend my day into a learning experience so that we can learn as leaders to leave our own mark. And so a good place to start there is to define leadership. You can't have a leadership talk without the speaker defining leadership, but I bet I would give it to you, give you different definitions from some of the other speakers that you might hear. And I've done that deliberately because you don't need to hear something over and over. You need to hear something unique. And I do as well. So these are the challenges I'm dealing with. I'm trying to adopt as a leader and become more mature as a leader. The first thing I think a leader does is to change the direction or the speed of the team. You see, a leadership skill is to have the vision to recognize where this is going to end up. Before anyone else on the team can, before anyone else that you're leading can, you need to say, I'm going to triangulate. If we stay on this course, where does this end? And if it's not in a good place, then you might need to have a leadership intervention, that you're the person that starts it, you're the spark, and say, we need to change the direction of this team. We're not going to come out at a good place. We might need to make a slight course adjustment. We might need to turn 180 degrees and go a different direction, but a change of direction is what a leader does. A leader also might need to change the speed of the team. Even if you're on the right course, even if you're running the right plays in the game, if time's going to run out before you can get ahead, you're not going fast enough. And so a job of a leader, I believe, is to consider the direction and the speed of the team in advance of others seeing it, to have the leadership vision to be able to see where it's going and make the adjustments that are necessary. Another definition I would give you about leadership comes from my experience with our kids. And it's a combination of control, influence, and prayer. And as most of us who are in leadership roles, I would say, might have a little bit of a control freak gene in you. Anybody share that with me? Okay, you probably consider yourselves to be just a little bit of a control freak. Both of our kids inherited a good dose of that from me. And as they were growing up, I noticed that they become frustrated when things weren't turning out the way they wanted them to be turned out. And I started preaching to them. In fact, if they heard me speaking about this right now, their eyes would roll because they've heard this so many times. And I would say, you can't control everything. You can only control what you can control. And of course, then when things weren't happening that I thought would happen, they go, Dad, you can't control everything. I can only control. And so I had to expand that and say, well, there's some things you can control. There's some things you can influence. And then everything else you need to pray about. You just need to have a long prayer list. And folks, I think that's true of us as leaders. We overestimate our ability to control things. And we get ourselves in trouble and we get frustrated when it doesn't work out. In reality, there's only one thing I can control, and that's me. I can't control any other human on this planet. I have tried and tried and tried, but Karen cannot be controlled. All right, it's not going to work. It's impossible. And in fact, I can't control everything about me. I can only control two things about me. That's the way I think and the way I act, my attitude and my activity. And so I need to narrow what I'm trying to control, but work on that like crazy because, boy, it needs a lot of work. And then I need to think about what I can influence. And in reality, as leaders, I know that I do, and I believe most leaders do, we overestimate our ability to influence. We think anybody that we brush up against, anybody we shake hands with, anybody that we spend 20 minutes talking to at breakfast, we can be a huge influence on. And that's possible, that could happen. But the odds are that you can only influence people that you come in contact with daily, or maybe at least weekly. You've got to have a tremendous amount of personal contact with another human to influence them, I believe. That's the reason I think our scope of influence is probably those that are in our family that we spend a lot of time with and those that we work with regularly. It's a smaller group than we often think it is. And if those two things are true, that means we need to have a long prayer list because there's not much we can do about anything else. And that was a joke that I made with the kids that I said, look, you know, you're worrying about too many things you can't control and you can't influence. You ought to be praying about more stuff. And so I use that to lighten up the process, but I think there's also some truth in it. The third thing I would say is most important of all is leadership is really relationships. Leadership is defined in so many different ways, and one of my favorite ways that leadership is defined is leadership is called influence. Leadership is influence, and that's true. But I would submit to you this morning that relationships are the bridge that influence travels on from the person that's influencing to the person becoming influenced. Without the relationship in place, the influence can't happen. And so the relationships are critical. I say lead people and manage processes. You can't have a relationship with a process. And I don't even like to use the word management when it comes to dealing with people. I believe we ought to be leading people, but we're not going to be able to lead them unless we can develop a relationship with them first. It's absolutely critical. What about some characteristics that I'm working on that I would share with you, and maybe you find yourself working on some of these? Characteristics of leaders. The first one is likability and what I call be-likability. I am amazed at how many leaders don't think that likability is important. Folks, if people don't like you, if they can't stand to be around you, it's going to be tough building a relationship with them. The first thing we need to do is be approachable. And folks, I'm not necessarily by nature that way. I have to work on that. Okay, I'm not a relationship person. Okay, I should get up here and talk about it. I know after this is over, my wife said, I can't believe you advise people to do that. You're horrible at that. Okay, I'm not a relationship person by nature. I need to work on that. I need to work on likability. How many of you ever give yourself the caller ID test? You know what the caller ID test is? When you dial someone on your cell phone and you know it's ringing on the other end and they pick up that phone and look at it and your name is on the screen, what goes through their mind? Are they saying, this is the call I've been waiting on? This is the call that's going to encourage me. You talked about encouragement, Randy, an important leadership trait. This is the call that's going to make me a better person. Or do they look at it and say, in 2 more rings, that one's going to voicemail and I won't have to put up with that dude? What is it that they think about us as leaders? Are we likable? But even more important than that is be-likability. Folks, I try to like everybody. I like everybody I can. I hope everybody likes me. But there's a much shorter list of people that I want to be like. That's a different approach. That's a package deal. If we're trying to become leaders that people want to be like, they have to accept us not just for our ability to run a business or to lead a team or to win. They have to say that's a pretty good person. That's a person that has the balance that Randy mentioned. That's a person that has all the areas of life being worked on, not perfect, but being worked on simultaneously. And so be-likability is absolutely critical. Honesty about weakness. Boy, leaders are proud people. We are proud people, and a lot of times a leadership role makes us prouder. And we've got to protect against that. We've got to be honest with ourselves about what we're not good at. You make a different set of decisions. I make a different set of decisions about who I want to be around and who I need to be around to lead an organization if I'm trying to be around people who are strong where I'm weak. And if I'm not honest about my weakness, I'll pick people that are like me. And we'll all be strong in a few areas and weak in a lot of areas. And that's not good for an organization. That's not good for success. We need to be honest about our weaknesses and surround ourselves with people that can fill those gaps that we all have. And then leadership as a calling is important. I get a chance occasionally to talk to young people who are making decisions about their lives. Are they going to school? Are they going to accept a job? What are they going to major in? What are they going to do with their lives? And I always try to explain to them the difference between a job, a career, and a calling. A calling has purpose. A calling means you're here for a bigger reason. You're not just here for your own benefit and maybe the benefit of a few people around you, but you're here trying to lead and develop and help an organization, to help a team. And so I would challenge all of us to think of our leadership role as more than just a job or even a career, but as a calling that has the success of others at stake. And then finally, our role as a leader, I believe, is to multiply leadership. We can't be leaders and be an island. We've got to look behind us and see if other leaders have been developed in our path. And that's one of the ways that we gauge success, is are we building those relationships that result in other people becoming successful leaders because of our impact. And I think it goes right back to the final bullet on the previous slide, which was relationships. It's all about relationships. As I look at the handful of things that I've been able to accomplish as a leader, I can tie almost every single one. In fact, I think I could tie every single one back to a relationship with someone who influenced me. So let's spend a minute, if we could, and just use my path as a case study. Let's go all the way back to, the sand of South Georgia and figure out how does a person get from there to here? What's happened to him in the process? Who has intervened? Who has directed him? And I think you'll see it's all about relationships. My story would start with my mom and dad. They were part of the greatest generation. I was the last of 4 kids, and I was a little bit of a surprise. I came late. My dad had retired from a 20-plus year career in the military the year before I was born. And then I came along. But boy, what a generation that was, appropriately called the greatest generation. They were children of the Depression. If your parents or grandparents came from that era, folks, that put a stamp on them, that left a mark. They have a unique perspective on things. They are independent, they're responsible, they're self-reliant. They passed all that along to me and all that along to anybody they came in contact with. We as a family knew it was all about personal responsibility. That was the first thing that I remember that they passed along, that I look back and I say, that's where that trait comes from. The second thing that I think my mom and dad passed along, and I could give you a long list, but I'll just give you a few this morning, is toughness. You know, today I think in our society we lack a lot of leadership toughness. It's hard to find a leader that'll make a tough call. In government, in business, anywhere we are. And that was a tough set of people. I think that's what we're missing today. And they passed along some tremendous toughness. And I could always depend. I knew that whatever I was dealing with, they had dealt with something a lot tougher than that. And this wasn't going to slow them down. And then the third thing I think they passed along that I specifically would recall this morning was they passed along an understanding that it's not all about me. It's not all about any one of our kids. It's not all about them, that we're here for a greater calling. They passed along a huge spiritual sensitivity. They didn't pass along a religion. They didn't pass along their faith. That's not the way it worked. But that same personal responsibility gene, they said, Glenn, that works in your spiritual life as well. You've got to develop a personal spiritual stance, a personal relationship with Jesus Christ that's yours and yours alone, not because they had one. And that's been an important trait that I look back on and I say that's where they came from. Now, moving from mom and dad, I learned a strong lesson that I call leadership clustering, because I looked at my older brothers and sisters. There in that picture, Melba, Dawn, my two older sisters, my older brother Art, there in a picture with my mom, who will be 90 later this year. And I realized that they were being influenced the same way that I was. And I didn't realize this at the time. We were just fighting with each other. If you need a lesson that you're not the center of the universe, an older brother or sister can give you that, I guarantee you. But after that, after you get beyond that, you realize, you know what, they were being influenced with the same leadership traits that I was. And so leadership works in clusters. Our parents had a leadership cluster following them of all of their kids. But it's not just that. I realized as my older sisters got married, their husbands were influenced and they were attracted to each other for a lot of the same reasons, and they became part of the leadership cluster. And that's pretty amazing. I know in most families, brother-in-law is just another word for argument, right or wrong, when the family gets together. That's all, they're interchangeable. But I found brothers-in-law who were also leadership influences, just like my older brothers and sisters were, because leadership and influence clusters together. And that's a principle that you can probably find. Learned a lot of great things from my brothers and sisters. They're great encouragers. I think that's a huge leadership trait. I also learned the power of expectation. My brothers and sisters had high expectations of me and of each other, just like my parents did. And I can tell you to this day, to disappoint an older brother or sister is something that I would never want to do because of the expectations they've had. Folks, that's a leadership lever. People will respond to your expectations as a leader if they know those expectations are for their own good. And I learned that trait from my older brothers and sisters. So you move past family, and what do you get next? You wind up with your experience in school. I had a lot of great teachers, a lot of great coaches along the way. But in high school, my football coach and athletic director, Coach Burlingame, major influence on my life. Remember, I told you that I was growing up playing sports and my dream was to play and coach. And the person responsible for that dream was Coach Burlingame. Because here was a person who had such an impact on me as a high school student and a football player. Learned so many things from him. Great motivator, great coach, first of all, won a number of state championships under his leadership in several different sports in our school. But in addition to being a great coach, I realized that he was a master at his craft. Master motivator, a great encourager. You know, as leaders, we're going to be called to motivate others, to ask others to do things they wouldn't do without our intervention. So we've got to be motivators. You may not view yourself as a natural motivator, but if you're in a leadership position, you are called on to motivate. And motivation comes from encouragement, which he was great at, and comes from challenge. See, it's not just saying, Glenn, you're great, you're going to be great, you're awesome, I'm so proud of you. That works sometimes. Sometimes it's, Glenn, if you don't step up, if you don't pull it together, the team's depending on you. You've got to step up and make this happen, and being a challenging leader is a different type of motivation. What a master. But this was also the person that probably led me to put the bullet on the previous slide that leadership is a calling. One of the things I recognized even in high school, and you got to admit, a high school boys, you know, they're not the most perceptive individuals on the planet. Pretty thick at that age as young men. But I could see that this was much more than just a job for him. This truly was a calling. He and his wife would take the football players that were on academic probation and bring them to their homes for study hall and help them learn. They didn't have to do that. That wasn't their job. They would bring the boys that didn't meet the dress code because their hair was too long to their home and give them a haircut and send them back so that they could play. So many things that were above and beyond the call of duty because leadership was a calling. And this is when I said, boy, you know, I don't want to just like Coach Burlingame, I want to be like Coach Burlingame. What a huge leadership lesson that was for me. And then, of course, the most important and most influential person in my life, my wife, Karen. Now, what kind of leadership lesson can you learn from marriage? Well, folks, it reinforces just everything I've talked about so far. Because the first thing on the long list of things that my relationship with Karen has brought to me is understanding the power of the combination of strengths where you're weak. She has such a list of strengths that line up so perfectly with the areas where I'm weak. She's so smart. She's got such great people skills. She's so organized. And I am not naturally good in any of those areas. And so as a combination, we became much more powerful in our leadership roles, whether it was a leadership role in family or it was a leadership role in business. We've been blessed to do a lot of things together in business. And so our partnership has been important. And that's the second thing that I think she taught me about leadership is leadership is a team sport. Leadership is not something you do as an individual. If I'm going to accept a role as a leader, I've got to recognize that other lives around me are going to be influenced and impacted as I execute that role. You know, when they called and said, Glenn, we're putting a team together to move to Canada. Would you like to be part of that team? Well, the first thing I did is, I'm not sure, but I'll check with Karen and see if we'd like to be part of that team because we operate as a partnership. You know, we both had successful careers. We were married for 10 years before our kids were born, and Karen was in successful business roles during that first 10 years, but then when our first child was born, she got a promotion, and she became mom. And that, in our relationship, is the most important leadership role. You see, I never asked her to adjust her leadership role for what I was doing, but if I needed to change my leadership role to make sure that mom was effective, that was our deal because we were in this together. We were in this as a team. It's not an individual sport. The fact that she had a role as leader, as a mom, was more important than any business role I've had. And that's the priority that we had, and that's the way we made our decisions, and I couldn't have done that without her influence and her strengths. In the business area of my life, sorry if you can't see this from the back, but the leader of the team that moved to Canada that we spent most of that 15 years with, Dick and Betty Morgan, didn't know them before we moved to Canada with them. Can you imagine that? A 26-year-old and a 25-year-old moving to a foreign country with a team of people they'd never worked with before. What could possibly go wrong? But what could go right? And we wound up being blessed to be led by a tremendous business leader. Virtually all of my business skills, fundamental business skills, were learned at the feet of Dick Morgan. But so much more than that, and the reason was because of the relationship. You see, Dick and Betty Morgan looked at us and our success as more than just business success and said, here's a young couple, probably pretty influential, as most young couples are, and if we don't invest our time and our effort and our lives in them, who knows where they'll turn out. Maybe they'll be successful in business, but they invested so much more. They invested in our family. They invested in our enjoyment of being up there. They made that move an adventure in addition to investing in our business success. You know, one of the other things I learned that I think is an important leadership dynamic is the amount of time spent with people. I said that you can only influence the people you spend a lot of time with. I remember when we moved to Canada and we were setting the business up there, I would come over to Dick's office to sit down and deal with an issue, and Dick never let a person interrupt him. He always welcomed whoever, he had tremendous people skills, always welcomed whoever was coming into the office, and I found myself sitting there, what I thought wasting time while he dealt with something else. And I actually felt guilty about it. I remember I said, you know what, I could be doing something productive, but I'm sitting here, I'm listening to Dick deal with a problem on the phone, deal with a people person or a people problem in person, deal with a business issue. And all I'm doing is watching. I think I'm wasting my time. And one day it struck me that that was the most valuable thing I could do, is spend time watching a leader in action. that was interested in my success, not just in my business success. Dick and Betty were a tremendous partnership. They had a tremendous example for us in marriage, in raising their children. They were great people. And so they influenced us in an incredible way. And as I look back, I say, okay, that's what creates leadership. It's not coming from a book. It's not coming from a course or a seminar. Certainly not coming from listening to a guy with a funny accent at breakfast. All right, it comes from relationships and people investing time in each other. And then, of course, today, our co-CEOs, Rick Williams and John Addison, are the people that I look to today to be leadership influences on me. Tremendous business leaders led our company out of the ownership of Citigroup to become our own company. And so I've learned how to run a public company as they have. Now, it's kind of interesting. They're tremendous influences on me, but we're almost the same age. We've been with the company almost the same period of time. So don't think that the person that's influencing you has to be from a different era, a different generation, or a different leadership level. You get a lot of influence from your peers. And of course, learned so many business skills from Rick and John, but they are truly examples of steward leadership, of servant leadership. They put the interest and the success of the company and of the team way ahead of their own personal success. They also are masters at positioning the leaders that they work with to their strengths. You know, I'm good at 2 or 3 things, but I'm bad at a whole lot of things. And one of the things that John and Rick do best is they give us responsibilities that are consistent with our strengths. So we're always working on our weaknesses, but we're working day to day in our positions of strength, and that's one of the reasons I believe they've been successful. They're also great role models as husbands, as fathers. They're great men of faith, even though they're of different faiths. And so what great personal examples, what great examples of someone I'd want to be like. Now, that's my personal experience. And I could put a lot of other people up there. I could put our own children up there who today as young adults, I'm learning way more from them than they're learning from me. I could put friends up there like my friend Wendell that taught me to take risks, my friend Kurt that taught me to be a better people person. And that's my experience. And your experience might be different. You may think back and you know, Glenn, I didn't have the kind of family experience you had. My family was not a personal experience, and that's okay. You could say, Glenn, the only thing I got from my coach in high school was a wedgie. All right, it wasn't a great, you know, it didn't impact me that way. But folks, my question for you is, whose picture would you put on your slide? Who do you have in your life that you're plugged into and have the relationship with that you would say, that's the person that I'm looking to? Whether you're looking to them today or whether it's just memories. Dick has passed on, but I think every day of how would Dick do this? So it's not somebody that's necessarily influencing you real time, but it's somebody that you look back on and say, that's a pattern I can copy. Who would you put on your slide? Maybe a more important question is who out there today would put you on their slide? How many people, if they were developing a slide like this, would say, you know what, I want Glenn Williams' picture on that slide? I don't know the answer to that, but that's an important question for me to consider. How many people am I influencing as they think about leadership roles and relationships? You know, finally, I would close with you can't have a leadership talk in the 2000s without talking about purpose. It's the buzzword of the decade. Everybody talks about purpose. You got to lead on purpose. You got to have an organization with purpose. You got to have a purpose as a team, and it's a great concept. But as I hear people talk about that, sometimes I feel a little inferior because I'm not sure I know my purpose that well. I'm not sure I'm that clear. I'm still trying to figure out what I want to be when I grow up. How can I have a purpose that's that clear? But folks, it is absolutely critical. One of the things, if you're a student of human nature and you study people and human behavior, one of the things that baffles scientists is that regardless of education, regardless of religion, regardless of location on the planet or socioeconomic background, almost every human being believes in purpose. And scientists don't know why. The scientists that believe in the randomness of life, it totally astounds them because whenever they survey, people believe that they were put on this earth for a purpose. They believe that everything that happens for a purpose, that it's not random, that it's all held together. And so sometimes I get a little confused by the fact that I wish I could be clear on my purpose like a lot of people that I meet because it's so important. And what I've determined is that's not really what's important. It's not as important for me to know my purpose for sure and be totally clear on it as it is to know the one that gave me that purpose. See, that's what's important. If you're not clear on the purpose that you have, you can have a relationship with the one who designed you with a purpose in mind. I talked a lot about relationships this morning, and I believe firmly that the most important relationship that we can have is a personal relationship with Jesus Christ. That's at the root of everything else that I presented to you this morning. Folks, that's what will give you your purpose. I'll give you just 3 quick challenges as we close, 3 things to do, because I'm a to-do kind of person, okay? I don't work as well theoretically as I work with a to-do list, so I'll give you a to-do list with 3 things on it. The first thing I would encourage you to do is when this is over is plug into the person that invited you. If nothing else, get back with them and talk about all the things that I said that you disagree with. That'll be fine. But just get back and connect with the person that invited you here and make sure that you work on that relationship. The second thing I would encourage you to do is to plug into the leadership groups. I know that there's going to be some discussion about leadership groups after this. One of the things that I love about the business model of the Leaders Forum is the leadership groups that follow up on this. What a great place to develop the relationships that I was talking about. And then third is to pursue that personal relationship with Jesus Christ. If you do that, then your purpose in life will become clear. Thank you very much for your attention this morning. God bless each and every one of you.